Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Christina was busy in the kitchen, preparing for a family party. Everything was ready. The apartment was decorated. The table was almost completely set. Her daughter was sent to her grandmother. The only thing left was to take the chicken out of the oven and dress up herself, and wait for her husband to come to celebrate the 10th anniversary of their life together, the pink anniversary. Also, such a wedding is called pewter, but Christina liked to call it pink. Tin that metal is soft, not durable, and they have with David everything is serious. That's why the room for the festive dinner was decorated in pink colors. The doorbell rang. Already? Do you forget your key? Or is he carrying so many presents that his hands are busy? My heart trembled with joy. Christina smiled brightly and hurried to the door, but when she opened it, she saw not David, but as if she were herself, but still unmarried. So similar to her seemed a young woman holding the hand of a boy of about 6 years old. "How do you do?" said the guest, confused. "Can I have David? Will he come soon? You see, I need him very much. That is, my son and my own. This is Ethan, his son." The story of Ethan and the betrayal committed by David began 7 years ago, when he was a young, hopeful doctor standing puzzled over the bedside of a young patient. No, her illness did not raise any particular questions or concerns, just minor injuries from a minor traffic accident, but her appearance. She looked so much like Christina, his wife, but not the Christina she was now, after the birth of his daughter Lisa, but the Christina he had first seen and fallen in love with how long ago? 5 years ago? How light, slender, impetuous she was then. But a difficult pregnancy, a difficult birth, all of that had done its work. Christina had changed, not for the worse, and certainly these changes had not killed his love, but still. Here he saw a girl who reminded him of that young Christina, and David continued his rounds, but that patient was still on his mind. No, there are similar people, but like that. He knew his wife had no sisters, not even cousins, and here they were almost like twins. When he had finished his rounds, he sat down at his desk and opened the medical history of the Nancy he had been interested in. Well, yes, no particular resemblance. Surnames and patronymics are different. Date of birth does not say anything. So just a coincidence or a relative, but so distant that it doesn't matter? It happens. We lived in the same town, and it's a small world. Maybe some great-grandmother they have one, from Edak and strong genetics. Why not? What is strange is that the girl is interested in him, not in connection with the resemblance, but just interested, not as a patient. She is already confidently on the mend, which is not surprising. Youth and not with such traumas can cope easily. And not even as a girl who looks like a wife, but just as a girl of the type David has always liked. And then there's the fact that this Nancy was like taking him back to his youth. Christina, of course, is loved, familiar to the last line, and even the fact that she has gained these extra kilograms does not embarrass him in the slightest, so she even became nicer. But here comes the one whose brown hair has not yet known any chemistry. It is still as shiny, just as clogged with natural rings at the ends. The dark blue eyes are huge and look trustingly, hopefully, for happiness. The cares and anxieties of motherhood have not yet obscured their shine. The fat on the eyelids has not made them smaller, and the very features of the face are not distorted womanish puffiness. So it's the same Christina, only younger. So if his wife even found out about his interest in another, she would have nothing to be offended by. Especially since it's just an interest, nothing more. That's how it seemed at first, when he was going over the medical history. Then he suddenly caught himself wanting to see his patient, more and more often, and then not only to see her, but to talk to her. It turned out that Nancy did not mind socializing at all. David began to stay after his shift more and more often. He and Nancy would sit somewhere by the window or in a corner and talk. They couldn't get enough of each other. About what? They could hardly remember when they were apart. She went to her room. He went home to his wife, to his daughter. For some reason, Christina did not care much about his delays at work. She did not even demand explanations, because she believed her husband, or simply did not notice his absence. He himself did not feel any guilt. He did not do anything wrong. He was just talking to a girl who was attracted by the resemblance to his wife. But now it was time for Nancy to be discharged. David had just coincided, so that on the morning of her discharge, he finished his night duty. He didn't go home at once. He waited until the girl was about to leave the hospital. No one met her. Strangely enough, during all their conversations, he had learned almost nothing about her relatives, her family, her personal life in general. Nancy didn't like to talk about it, and David didn't insist. They left the hospital together. David offered the girl a ride home, she agreed. They drove up to the house. Nancy was in no hurry to get out. Apparently, they were both not at all happy that the acquaintance might end there. "Well, Nancy, I am very glad that you have recovered and hope that nothing more bad happens to you. The only sad thing is that we won't be in touch now. I'm so used to our conversations. It's rare to have such a heart-to-heart talk with someone," David said with a smile. "But why don't we keep chatting? After all, we are not numb." Nancy smiled back. "Will you come to my place after duty? We'll have tea." "With pleasure." The man exclaimed, feeling a hint in this invitation, and was not mistaken. This morning they became close. David himself was amazed that so easily and thoughtlessly cheated on his wife, that he gave himself to the new feeling with such delight. He, tired after the experience, dozed off on his mistress's shoulder, and woke up only after a couple of hours. It was time to go home. He was already late. How would he look Christina in the eye now? He was deceiving Nancy and her, for the girl was probably hoping for some development in their relationship. Nancy knew, of course, that he was married, but David did not tell her about his private life either, and certainly did not say a word about the resemblance between the girl and his wife. How to get out of this situation now? The man thought, but everything turned out quite well. He warmly said goodbye to Nancy, returned home, and looking at his wife, suddenly realized that he had no remorse. It was as if he had been with Christina those few morning hours, with that past young, but his Christina. "What are you doing off duty so late?" "I was getting worried," asked the wife. "To be honest, I just fell asleep." David answered cheerfully. "It was a difficult night, not a moment of rest. I just collapsed in the residence room in the morning and fell asleep. But they didn't wake me up, or I wouldn't have made it home. I fell asleep at the wheel." He himself was surprised how easily and casually he lied, how he kissed his wife, rubbed her head. His daughter ran out to him. Everything was as usual, as if he had not been a few hours ago in the arms of another woman. "I guess that's because everything's okay. I didn't do anything wrong. It was an accident and probably won't happen again, except by accident." About the fact that this episode was and would remain the only one, he was lying to himself already. He was attracted to Nancy. He realized that their meetings would continue. And David did become a frequent visitor to the small apartment that Nancy rented, where she lived alone. This love nest became for him that quiet harbor in which he continued to live his youth. As it happened, their romance with Christina was very precocious. They first fell in love with each other, and only then met, and by the time they met they already knew that they could not live without each other. so they did not delay with the proposal and wedding. And Lisa appeared less than a year after the wedding. What was there to wait for? They love each other, they are happy, and therefore the child was desired and loved. But after her birth, the daughter became the main person in the life of Christina and David himself, and his own feelings, worries, and desires went to the background. Outwardly, Christina changed so much that those who knew her before marriage, and then a few years did not see, did not even recognize. David always believed that to discuss the appearance of a woman, it is the last thing, so never commented, nor extra pounds or other changes in his wife. She was still his favorite Christina. Yes, he saw her every day and did not notice much change, but added a little weight and what? But even a lot of weight gain, but not to the point of ugliness, not to serious health problems. She feels comfortable in her weight, with this funny old lady chemistry on her head, without makeup, in comfortable shoes, low heels, in cozy sweaters and pants on the elastic band, and very well, and he is good. Christina herself has become so cozy, homely, you can immediately see that she is an ideal housewife, wife, and mother. And what else does a man need for happiness? It turned out something is needed, and he realized it with the appearance of this girl. But she's not Christina. Yes, they're alike, but they're different, and they're different. Even if Nancy was a clone of his Christina, he wouldn't have left his wife. He loved her and his daughter too. Besides, he knew Christina's character. If she found out about the affair, everything would be over. She wouldn't understand and wouldn't forgive, and Nancy? After all, this girl became a dear person, and without her the world of David would be impoverished. Is his behavior fair to her? Yes, she doesn't allow herself any hints or demands, but she's probably hoping he'll make some kind of decision. And she is so lonely, she has no relatives, and suddenly there will be a man who will sincerely love her and propose marriage? Yes, that would be a solution. I want her to be happy, David thought, and then he was afraid. But I don't want it to happen soon, because then how would I stay? Time passed, and David was not going to take any steps. He was quite satisfied with the way things were. But as time passed, Nancy began to talk to him on more distracted and unpleasant topics. David, why don't you ever talk about your wife? She asked him once during another date. Why should I talk about her? I don't think it's appropriate during meetings with you. The lover tensed up. Why not? From books, from movies, I know that married men often tell their mistress about how their wives are bitches or, on the contrary, weak, sick women who cannot leave. Well, it's with the implication that they can't divorce yet for whatever reason, and you're not even hinting at anything. Is our relationship completely hopeless? I don't know what to say to that. I'm afraid of losing you, it's true. But I don't know what's gonna happen. So, if you have to explain, you don't have to explain, is that it? Coldly asked the girl, not like that. David drew her to him. I understand, Nancy, but give me a little time. That's why I haven't said anything yet, because I think about this situation all the time, and every day I realize more and more clearly that I have to make up my mind. That time they made up and parted as usual, but David returned home in a depressed mood. He wasn't going to decide anything, and that meant breaking up with Nancy, but he didn't want to. At home it turned out that Christina was beginning to suspect, if not guess, that something was amiss. Where have you been, David? Why so late? He was greeted by an irritated, agitated wife. I was where I always am, at work. What kind of question is that? Did something happen? Exactly what happened. My mom called. She wasn't feeling well. She wanted me to bring her medicine, and just to be with her, but I have to pick up Lisa from music, then do her homework, and she has to get up early tomorrow. She can't take her to her grandmother's, and you're not there as usual. I called you at work. They said you left a long time ago. And that was 3 hours ago. Do you have any explanation? Of course I do. What about Mom? How's it going? Mom's fine. I called Aunt Lucy. She had to go. Like my mom is some kind of orphan, she has no daughter, and a doctor's son-in-law. But you didn't answer my question. I had to urgently visit a patient. He was recently discharged, and suddenly his condition worsened. I could not go. I didn't know anything would happen to your mom. Yeah, that's life. That's my job, I'm sorry. But what am I supposed to think? You've been singing the same song lately. Work, work, work. No time. You're away from home all the time. You can't remember when you went out with your daughter or just socialized. You've been working for years, but it's never been like this for the last 3 months. Christina, I'm not standing still. I'm not going to stay until retirement as an ordinary doctor who prescribes oil and aspirin for all diseases. I am improving and successfully, and our future with you and Lisa depends on it, by the way. I do not understand the essence of your claims. Do you suspect me of something bad? This is news. We've never had anything like this in our relationship. It's easy not to suspect me when I'm always at home in the same robe. And me in a tuxedo at a social event. I'm always in the hospital in my bathrobe too, by the way. If you don't believe me, please embarrass yourself and me. Call that patient and have him tell you what time I arrived and what we did. David knew perfectly well that his wife wouldn't call anyone. And indeed, apparently, his tired and sad face made the right impression on Christina. She came over and hugged her husband. I'm sorry, I didn't think anything like that. Honestly, I was just worried. My mom called, complaining about my heart pressure. I should have gone to her sooner, but you weren't here and I didn't warn you. I thought something had happened. You know how panicky I am. Get undressed, wash your hands, and sit down to dinner. David hugged his wife, pressed his face into her unkempt hair, breathed in the native smell, devoid of any perfume additives. My darling, my dearest. He thought, feeling the guilt of his wife squeezing his heart. What's Nancy? What am I upsetting my Christina for? Tomorrow they'll say that's enough, they've played, and that's all. There'll be nothing more. The moment he hugged Christina, he saw the familiar surroundings of home. Especially after Lisa came out of her room and hugged both parents at once, it seemed the only right decision. He was even relieved, but in the morning on the way to work, he doubted its correctness. What exactly is the problem? I love Christina when I'm at home with her, and when I'm with Nancy, I love her. I mean, it's not like that. I love Christina again, but the same old Christina. If Nancy wasn't so much like my wife, I wouldn't even pay attention to her. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tell her soon that I love her, but I'm not gonna divorce her. And not because my wife is something wrong, but I just don't intend to, that's all. And the date should be shortened somehow, or what? So he thought on the way to work, and then in the hospital, every now and then returned his thoughts to this question. After all, she was with him for a reason. She might take offense, she might even cry, but it would pass, and they would be together again. How long and in what capacity? That depends. They're not the only ones who live like this. A lot of people have been doing it for years. He also watches movies and reads books. He knows that it happens, and there is nothing terrible in it. This thought calmed David, who did not want to part with any of his women. And they, he was sure, didn't want to, which meant, well, Christina would live in happy ignorance like that, and Nancy would just live. What did she have to worry about? A lot of people even find some advantages to being mistresses, and she would eventually. She and Nancy didn't see each other every day, but several times a week worked out. David was not an oligarch, that's why he didn't give any fancy gifts to his mistress. He didn't have such an opportunity. He came, having something for tea, but on that decisive day, decided to be more generous. He bought an expensive bouquet of flowers, a cake, champagne. Nancy, opening the door and seeing him with all these relations, shone with restraint. Hope lit up in her eyes. "What's the occasion for such gifts?" she asked. When David, without saying the main words, began to help her set the table for tea. "Just no occasion. Can I have a little holiday like this with the woman I love?" "Thank you, of course, but I thought you had made some decision." The girl answered bluntly. "And as for the decision, well, yes, you could say I have. I don't know how you react to it, but I hope it's not too bad." David got serious. "So, Nancy, here's the thing, I thought and realized that I can't leave my wife, not because she's something wrong, and not because I'd get in trouble, but I just can't, that's all. So this is a parting gift, a consolation gift?" She pointed to the table. The girl was visibly penetrated, as if the air had been let out of her. "Why on earth would you do that?" David exclaimed, this with somewhat false enthusiasm. "Why should we say goodbye and comfort each other? After all, we may well be together without all this." "All what? And together how?" "Running to me in your spare time. Is that what you call being together?" Nancy's face has gone completely dark, but that's how we used to live. There doesn't seem to be anything awful about it, does there? Her cold, implacable tone confused the man. What's she doing all of a sudden, making a big deal out of it? And your wife, is she okay with it? She is satisfied with the fact that you will live with her and me? What does that have to do with my wife? Christina doesn't know anything, and I'd like it to stay that way. And my wishes don't count. Nancy smiled, and that smile gave hope. Your wishes are law. Everything but that. Well, that is, to formalize, to legalize our relationship. I love you, and... Okay, how about this? I want a car for Christmas. Valentine's Day, a diamond ring, March 8th, Canary Islands. Every date like this. She pointed her finger at the bed. I wanted to start at the swankiest restaurant. Is that gonna be the law too? I don't understand you today. We're talking about serious things, and you're making jokes. Yes, I can't give you such gifts. You know that very well. But we could go to a restaurant sometime, if you really want to. Yes, but on the other side of town, secretly, so that no one, God forbid, will notice, right? Yeah, well, I don't see anything wrong with it. A lot of people do it, and if you think about it, you'll realize it's not the worst option. I just don't see any other way, Nancy. Why not? There it is. The girl pointed to the door. However, if you want to go on with all this drudgery, then please, through your wife's consent. No, why? Why should she stay in the dark? Why should I deceive this probably good woman? Tell her the plan and bring me a note from her agreeing to this cohabitation. I don't know if you're making such a stupid joke or what. David shouted in a falsetto. Why am I joking? You could offer me such a thing, but why not her? Stay honest and honorable until the end. What are you looking at, David? Don't you realize how mean you're being to me and to your wife? No, I can see that you don't. Well, that's fine. Take your flowers and your gentleman's kit and get out of here. I don't want you to live like a sultan. I don't want to be the youngest wife. David was astonished. He didn't expect such an angry response. She would have screamed and cried and then consoled herself, but her. I tried to correct the situation somehow. But how could I? As a result, I still ended up with my kit on the stairs in front of the closed door. So I left the house with a bouquet, a cake, a bottle. Walked to the car, and it seemed like all the windows were looking at him and wondering, "What's this? Nancy blowing off her own. What's she up to? It's all right, he's a man. Where's he gonna go with all this stuff? Take a wife like Nancy told him to say goodbye. No in this mood to come with cakes. Why not? Christina will definitely be happy. She likes sweets and champagne too. We can't throw them away." He calmed down as he drove up to the house. It is clear that Nancy, hearing such a proposal, was offended, especially since she expected something else. She thought that he would fall on his knee and give her a ring, but he did. Well, that's the zealous one. She'll calm down, move in, and everything will be fine. In a few days she herself will call to apologize, and he, understandably, will forgive. But time went on. Nancy did not call, and this quarrel was not forgotten. It was a thorn in the heart, and sometimes it tingled very badly. Was it really over? Would there be no more meetings, no more secret dates? Well, like this, he liked it. After a week, he couldn't stand it any longer, so he went, although he had no idea how to organize his behavior. Well, I guess it's up to him. She'll probably be happy. Why didn't she call? It was a character thing. He did not withstand the first. It will be very flattering to the girl. This time he arrived without bouquets, rang the bell at such a familiar door, expecting hurried footsteps, but the apartment was quiet. The bell, which he kept pressing, sounded somehow peculiarly, wistfully in the apparently empty apartment. The neighboring door opened in the apartment opposite. A rather young woman, in a bathrobe, kitchen apron with a bucket, everything as it should be. The bucket, empty almost, came out obviously to tell him, "Are you here to see Nancy? She's moved out. I don't know where she was renting. She's registered somewhere, I don't know, in the suburbs or something. She gave the landlady the keys yesterday and moved all her stuff out. And the neighbor with an independent look went to the garbage chute. We're proud girls, aren't we?" David had to turn around and go home. So much for love. At home, he lay down on the sofa, facing the wall, refused to eat dinner, referring to his indisposition. He probably had a cold. Lisa, who wanted to get her share of fatherly attention, sent her away. "Go on, daughter, talk to your mother." "I don't feel well." "Don't get infected." It was really bad somehow. It was hard. Could it be never again? Every now and then there was a pounding in his brain, and often after work his car, like an old clever horse, persistently drove not home, but there to the house where no one waited for him anymore. He stopped, put his head down on his clenched hands on the steering wheel. Could it be no more, never again? Then it passed. Let go, never, so never. What can you do? Even felt relieved after a while. Finally, no need to run somewhere, to take time away from my own, to fear exposure, to constantly feel guilty in front of everyone, to think about how it would all end. It all ended, a little sad, but that's just it, a little, just a little. And it's been 7 years since that story. Did David remember that affair? Yes, occasionally, and still with the same relief. Christina never learned anything. Everything ended safely and without loss for everyone. Here is already approaching the 10-year anniversary of their marriage, and this, I must tell you, is a serious date. It was decided to celebrate it together, without guests and unnecessary fuss, because it is only their holiday. Well, for friends, relatives can be celebrated on another day, and they will not be offended. Christina's mother congratulated them the day before when they took Lisa to her, so that it would be just the two of them. Not so often they managed to stay really alone. David respected his mother-in-law, Margaret. A strong woman, alone without a husband, she raised her daughter from the age of 5 and raised her well. Christina has the fondest memories of her childhood, and Margaret herself was a young, beautiful woman. And Look How You Are did not become divided into all sorts of relationships, did not spoil her daughter's life, trying to arrange her personal life. One, it is something, but worth it. So she still lives alone, with a cat, of course, flowers, and a parrot, and as she assures herself, quite happy with her life. She never talked about the reasons for her divorce, not only with her son-in-law, but also with her daughter. David only once tried to gently hint when they discussed the upcoming wedding. He asked, "Is Christina the father? Would he be too?" Margaret had darkened then and cut him off. No. Well, what's there to ask? What was there to discuss if it was unpleasant? For the young, she never tried to ruin their lives with her meddling, but she helped as much as she could at the first request. And she considered sitting with Lisa to be not a favor, but on the contrary, a pleasure. But they themselves did not abuse the opportunity to get rid of their Lisa, except on occasions like tonight. David, looking forward to a wonderful evening, was choosing a bouquet. A gift for his wife was already stashed in the car. "Are you here to see Nancy? She's moved out. I don't know where she was renting. She's registered somewhere. I don't know, in the suburbs or something. She gave the landlady the keys yesterday and moved all her stuff out. And the neighbor with an independent look went to the garbage chute. We're proud girls, aren't we?" David had to turn around and go home. So much for love. At home, he lay down on the sofa, facing the wall, refused to eat dinner, referring to his indisposition. He probably had a cold. Lisa, who wanted to get her share of fatherly attention, sent her away. "Go on, daughter, talk to your mother." "I don't feel well." "Don't get infected." "It was really bad somehow. It was hard." Could it be never again? Every now and then there was a pounding in his brain, and often after work his car, like an old clever horse, persistently drove not home, but there to the house where no one waited for him anymore. He stopped, put his head down on his clenched hands on the steering wheel. Could it be no more, never again? Then it passed. Let go, never, so never. What can you do? Even felt relieved after a while. Finally, no need to run somewhere, to take time away from my own, to fear exposure, to constantly feel guilty in front of everyone, to think about how it would all end. It all ended, a little sad, but that's just it, a little, just a little. And it's been 7 years since that story. Did David remember that affair? Yes, occasionally, and still with the same relief. Christina never learned anything. Everything ended safely and without loss for everyone. Here is already approaching the 10-year anniversary of their marriage, and this, I must tell you, is a serious date. It was decided to celebrate it together, without guests and unnecessary fuss, because it is only their holiday. Well, for friends, relatives can be celebrated on another day, and they will not be offended. Christina's mother congratulated them the day before, when they took Lisa to her, so that it would be just the two of them. Not so often they managed to stay really alone. David respected his mother-in-law, Margaret. A strong woman, alone without a husband, she raised her daughter from the age of 5 and raised her well. Christina has the fondest memories of her childhood, and Margaret herself was a young, beautiful woman. And Look How You Are did not become divided into all sorts of relationships, did not spoil her daughter's life, trying to arrange her personal life. One, it is something, but worth it. So she still lives alone, with a cat, of course, flowers, and a parrot, and as she assures herself, quite happy with her life. She never talked about the reasons for her divorce, not only with her son-in-law, but also with her daughter. David only once tried to gently hint when they discussed the upcoming wedding. He asked, "Is Christina the father? Would he be too?" Margaret had darkened then and cut him off. "No. Well, what's there to ask? What was there to discuss if it was unpleasant? For the young, she never tried to ruin their lives with her meddling, but she helped as much as she could at the first request. And she considered sitting with Lisa to be not a favor, but on the contrary, a pleasure. But they themselves did not abuse the opportunity to get rid of their Lisa, except on occasions like tonight. David, looking forward to a wonderful evening, was choosing a bouquet. A gift for his wife was already stashed in the car. Christina was putting the finishing touches on the preparations for the party. David offered to go to a restaurant, but she only waved away. She did not like such trips. First of all, it was an unnecessary waste of money, and for what? What can compare with home food, cooked with love, and taking into account all the tastes of the beloved? And secondly, well, you cannot relax well. Around people, noise, music rattling, by evening you will get tired of it all, and then still go home. There was a third secret reason why Christina did not want to go out in public. She got fat. Well, yes, it's after the birth of her daughter, apparently, hormones there, and all that, because there is nothing to blame herself. She does not eat so much, and moves all day long is not lying around. But here are creeping kilograms from where that and takes. If the first 5 years of marriage could talk about a pleasant fullness, now no, for home, for shopping, for walks with her daughter, with her husband all normal, but for the restaurant was embarrassed herself. Besides, there were no outfits suitable for such outings. Not because there is no money, of course. There are no decent clothes for full women. Going to the store turns into another humiliation. Young, thin saleswomen look like a scarecrow, and to read their thoughts, mousings do not need to be. Everything is written on their faces. And why do these elephants come here? They should be at home in their hoodies. For today's evening, Christina prepared her banquet dress, bought 5 years ago, and only used a couple of times. She hadn't tried it on yet, but it was free. And the style wasn't so strict. It should fit. I stood in front of the mirror and tried to put it on. No, I managed to put it on only with my head, and then I couldn't. It was starting to crack at the seams. Yes, it's tight. I'm going to lose weight. We'll celebrate. We'll finish everything that we can't do today, and that's it. Kathy suggested some miracle diet. She has already lost 3 kilograms on it. I should copy it from her. And I won't eat a gram of extra, because I was slim once. She changed into a clean, and even flirty, but oversized robe. It'll do. It's a blessing that David loves her, no matter what. And then the doorbell rang. Christina wasn't prepared for that at all. Could it be a stupid joke, an elaborate taunt? What kind of son is her David? And if it had been an older boy, she would have understood. Little did the man have before they met. But this little boy, younger than their Lisa. So he was born when they were already married. Yeah, that's bullshit. Her husband had never cheated on her. And the woman stammered and said, "Don't think I'm asking for anything. Only what no one else can do to save my son. I tried as much as I could to do it myself, but not everything is possible, even for a mother." Christina looked at her and understood nothing. The situation was saved by the appearance of David. He opened the door himself, not suspecting anything. With a cheerful smile and a big bouquet of scarlet roses, He entered the kitchen and was stunned to see both his wife and his former, almost forgotten lover. "You?" Only he could squeeze out, but that was enough. He realized that everything the woman said, so similar to her, was true. "I'm sorry, David. I realize I've made your life difficult by showing up, but you have to understand. Ethan and I have no way out, and your phone has changed, and no one at the hospital can tell us anything, and time is of the essence. Believe me, if it wasn't for your son's illness, you wouldn't know anything." "Well, you two talk about your own things. I'll go to my room." With unruly lips, Christina said. It wasn't that she wanted to leave the former lovers alone. She just didn't have the strength to be in the same room with them. There was no strength to wield the muscles of her face and her entire body. In the room, she sank into the chair without strength, hunched over, covered her face with her hands. That was all. All her ideas about her own life had turned out to be a lie. In the kitchen, meanwhile, a conversation was going on. "I've probably caused you trouble. Are you having some kind of holiday?" Nancy asked tiredly. "Yes, and yes. Why did you come? Who does that?" David was annoyed, frustrated. He wanted to run to the room to calm Christina down. But here was Nancy and this boy, the son. Does he belong here, listening to this kind of talk? "Let's go to the room, boy. There's toys in there. You can look at them, okay? Mommy and me need to talk. The boy's name is Ethan. He's your son." Nancy threw them in the back. The child looked up at David with huge, surprised and slightly frightened eyes. "Sit here for a minute. We'll be quick." Going into the kitchen, David again attacked Nancy. "How could you? I don't understand. What were you trying to accomplish? This is the first time I've ever heard of you having a child with me. Why did you disappear and say nothing? I don't know what you're accusing me of. I didn't tell you, but how could I be sure you'd be interested? And I didn't know when we broke up. And I don't want anything from you. I'm telling you Ethan is sick. To make a long story short, he has leukemia. He needs a bone marrow transplant. There's nothing in the unrelated donor database that's a match, and probably never will be. I'm not a match either. They said to talk to my father, which I'm doing, but it seems in vain." Nancy spoke calmly, but her face grew darker and darker, the hope in her eyes melting away. How much younger is she than Christina? About 10 years, but now they looked the same age, but kind of opposites. Christina, the positive, Nancy, the negative, thought David, with keen sympathy for both women. But why in vain? "There, you've ruined my life." "Oh, come on, I'm not saying no. Don't make a beast out of me. I agree, but I need to see the documents, history, diseases, tests, talk to the attending doctor. You still don't believe?" Nancy asked with annoyance. "I believe, but I'm a doctor, Nancy. How do you see it? Am I supposed to put it in a jar and give it to you now? This is a serious operation, and my faith is not going to make a difference." I agree. And don't cry, please." Noticing that tears glistened in Nancy's eyes, he exclaimed, "We'll meet at your hospital with your doctor and discuss everything. In the meantime, yes, I understand. Thank you, and I'm sorry. Do you want me to explain it to your wife myself?" "What's there to explain?" "Leave your phone number. We'll call tomorrow and figure out what to do next." David walked Nancy and Ethan to the door and stroked the boy's head. And that light touch somehow convinced him better than any test. Yes, this was his son. He, like many men, wanted to have a son, but Christina, exhausted from her first difficult pregnancy and labor, didn't want any more children. Right now, though, it wasn't this unexpected son he needed to think about, it was his family. He took a deep breath and entered the room where his wife was. At the sight of Christina, his heart clenched. So lonely, miserable, lost she looked. And it was aggravated by the fact that she was sitting in front of a table set for the holiday. Even the candles were in the candle holder, though not yet lit. "Christina?" David exclaimed. "I'm sorry you had to witness all this." "I'm not. At last I knew the truth. After many years and a whole life of that boy, and a part of my daughter's life." In a colorless voice, Christina replied, "I hope you're taking it all in stride. Let me tell you." David sat down on the chair. He felt that to approach his wife now was not appropriate, and it would be unpleasant. "No, spare me the details. I know roughly what happens between a man and a woman in order for a child to be born." The phrase might have been humorous, but there was not a shadow of a smile in her voice or on her face. She remained just as frozen. "Well, let's not stoop to vulgarity. That's not what I mean. I never made a big deal out of it. It was a casual affair. It wasn't even an affair. We met a few times and that was it. Then we broke up and didn't see each other for years. I didn't even know she had a baby. I swear," with my hands clasped to my chest, David assured me. "And you think that excuses you? That you betrayed not one woman with a child, but two?" Christina's voice seemed to revive, and although it didn't promise anything good, David found it necessary to start the explanation. "Where have I betrayed anyone? What are you talking about, Christina?" "It was Nancy who meant nothing to me, just as I meant nothing to her. I didn't know about the baby. And why did she briefly come to my attention?" "No, wait, I'll tell you." He lowered himself to the floor next to the chair in which his wife was sitting, wanted to take her hand, but Christina recoiled. "Okay, I won't touch you. You've probably noticed that this woman, Nancy, looks something like you. A lot like you. Don't you agree? I even think you're distant relatives, though you don't know it. It's possible, isn't it?" "I've noticed, but does it matter?" "Do not say that you mixed us up. It was already in some anecdote." The wife sighed. "And if she seemed even my own sister, what does it change, if only for the worse? Not mixed up, of course, just. Well, like falling in love with you again or something?" "Well, yeah, she was like another version of you to me. Is that clear?" "No, it doesn't," Christina replied tiredly. "I do not suffer from schizophrenia. I exist in a single copy. One thing I don't understand is that you betrayed me and my daughter." "With what?" David shouted, banging on the arm of the chair. "It was 7 years ago, completely by accident. You wouldn't have known anything if it hadn't occurred to you. And who'll give me a guarantee that the next 7 years you've been faithful, that these won't come again and again?" "I will. Nothing more has happened, and nothing more will happen. How about from this day forward, you watch my every move, demanding accountability for every minute I'm gone?" He realized he was talking nonsense, but he couldn't think of any more acceptable way to save the relationship. "You still can't deny me the pleasure of turning me into the heroine of an anecdote. The fat wife watching her husband. Classic, huh? That's quite a role you've cast me in. I'm not gonna cheat on you, and I haven't cheated on you before." David was starting to get annoyed with this conversation. What does she really want? Not much happened a long time ago. Only the kids were coming from somewhere. "Okay, what about that boy, your son? Ethan's name, I think?" "Yeah, Ethan. Well, I don't know anything yet. According to her, he's sick leukemia. He needs a bone marrow donor, and I'm his only option. If that's true, I'll take it, of course, but it won't affect our relationship. Yeah, It's hard to affect it anymore. You know, David, I can't listen to your stupid explanations right now. I can't even see you right now. I'm sorry. I'm going to leave now. Where? Why? David was not so much frightened as indignant. Where could his wife go? Nowhere. She's just acting out, pretending to be resentful. He has to justify himself like a fool, apologize, lay on his feet. But for what? Where to? Not to his lover. I'll go to my mom. I can't look at you now. Christina, let's forget all this. Let's sit down at the table and celebrate our anniversary. You've prepared everything so beautifully, and so have I. Oh, the flowers are there. The water's still running. No, as it turns out, we'd have nothing to celebrate. Christina had apparently decided to be adamant to the end, and it was increasingly annoying her husband. Listen, darling, tell me straight out what you want me to do. Punch my head against the wall? Challenge myself to a duel? Give you a diamond ring? Christina sighed without answering. She started to pack some things into a travel bag. Ah, that's it. You have serious intentions. Are we fat but proud? Oh, David realized that it's not the right thing to say. He's trying to make up for his grief, but he couldn't help himself. He got carried away. Do you know why I reached for that Nancy? It was because she was almost exactly like you, only she hadn't turned into a fat, clumsy fatty, because she never had a headache, because she didn't smell of sweat, kitchen, laundry detergent. Yes, I wasn't going to leave her for good, but if she hadn't, like you are now, started to make a sacrifice of herself, maybe I'd still be living in 2 houses. And you had eyes and brains so fat that you wouldn't have noticed anything. You didn't care. Why? My husband comes home, brings my paycheck. We go grocery shopping together every weekend. The fridge is full. Eat your second 100 pounds. What's the big deal? Do you realize what you've become? I can't go out with you except to the supermarket for food. And she's not happy about it, for God's sake. Husband's got a thing for the young and slim. At the beginning of this hysterical, boorish speech, Christina froze, bent down and stood like that, as if beaten by stones, then began as silently to collect things, already the daughter too. Sharply catching the bag, she headed for the door, and only then David realized what he had done. Christina, I'm sorry. He rushed to his wife. I'm sorry, please. Believe me, I didn't think for a minute before I said just that. It was some kind of a fit, delirium, delusion. But Christina coldly dismissed him and walked out. Go on, you'll come crawling back. I'll see if I can take you back after this. He shouted shrilly through the closed door, hoping that his wife could still hear him. Christina, she did, but this last shout could not hurt more than what her husband had said before. Those words of his had killed her, crushed her, serving as the collapse of her entire past life. She didn't want to cry. There were no tears. They seemed to be frozen somewhere there, in the region of her heart. Only when she got into the cab and called her mother's address, she suddenly felt tears flowing from her eyes. David, having realized that his wife had left and was not going to return soon, went into the room, came to the festive table, and scooped something from the crystal salad bowl with a spoon. He didn't understand what he was eating. He couldn't taste it. He opened a bottle of champagne, poured it into a mug, drank it greedily, as if it were water. I felt a little relieved, though I was still nauseous. But it was necessary that I should get such stupid women, one or the other. Who asked Nancy to come to my house? She could have come to the hospital, and Christina, what did she care about? Isn't the fact that in 7 years she's never had a suspicion of my fidelity? Doesn't mean I only love her. Every man's got 100 stories like that in 10 years. You got her to the point where you said a hell of a lot of things to her, and now you're apologizing for it. She's gone to her mom's to cry on her shoulder. The fact that Christina had gone to Margaret was not in doubt, but it did raise some concerns. Mother-in-law was certainly a good woman and treated him perfectly, considering her daughter's choice very successful, but she was too principled. Her son-in-law knew nothing about the reasons for her divorce from Christina's father, but he seriously suspected that Margaret had not forgiven her husband for some affair. And now her daughter would come to her, complain of her husband's betrayal, and her mother will sing to her something along the lines that you can't forgive, that once a traitor, always a traitor, and so on. After such a workup, try to get her back, especially if she will now, always with the mother-in-law to come. And in front of my daughter to arrange a showdown, the last thing I want to do. David thought with displeasure, not doubting that he would be able to get his wife back. But here, thanks to the mother-in-law's tweaks, it will be more difficult to do it. Besides, one must still think about Nancy and her son. Good boy, and yes, it's probably his son. He needs to be rescued, and he, David, is not going to deny the child help, but what happens next? Does Nancy have any thoughts of continuing the relationship in any way? To help his son financially, he agrees, but he is not ready for anything else. Still, it's great to have a son. It would be good to introduce them to Lisa. She'll be happy to know she has a little brother too. Except Christina wouldn't like that idea. Oh, okay. We have to tell her that the baby is a baby. He has to save him from a serious illness. I mean from death. And yes, he'll have to pay child support, but that's it. He has no intention of communicating with his son, and he has no intention of communicating with Nancy. He loves Christina, his wife, and he always will, no matter how fat she gets. Oh, my tongue! What did I say to Christina? Why didn't I just apologize, tell a lie, and then I just blurted it out? What woman would like that? Although maybe so it is better. Let her realize that, parting with me, forever alone will remain, hardly on her hunter will be found. With such thoughts he consoled himself, and gave himself hope that he might be reconciled with Christina, but there was no thought of Nancy. She might look better than his wife. But what did it matter? Christina was in a cab at the time, choking back tears. The cab driver, a young man, glanced at her in the rearview mirror, but remained silent. He had seen all sorts of things during his working hours, but this was strange, not to mention frightening. Well, sits, roaring fat aunt, nothing special. In any case, he cannot help, and comfort is not a master. Although, if it was a young and beautiful girl, he might have tried to find out what was wrong, asked if she needed help, but it was better not to get involved. Christina was glad of such delicacy. She certainly would not tell the cab driver about her troubles. She was not crying, but the tears were just rolling and rolling. There was no way to hold them back. She was sure that her relationship with David was over forever. She couldn't forgive what he'd done, let alone what he'd said in farewell. And it wasn't even the fact that she would now be alone forever that made her cry. Not even the memory of her husband's cruel words, Lisa, that's what was upsetting in the first place, because the girl loves her father so much. And now what? She's not even 10 years old. How do you explain to a child why they won't live with her beloved daddy now? But how to live with a man who does not put her mother in anything? She had always thought they had a happy marriage, that her husband loved her, but she was just a fat, clumsy thing to him. Margaret, opening the door and seeing her daughter in tears, was horrified. "Christina, what's wrong? What's the matter with you?" she exclaimed. "It's all right, Mom." Christina tried to calm her down. "Has Lisa gone to bed yet?" "Yes, she's asleep." Why were you crying?" "Hush, hush, I'll tell you everything." Mother and daughter sat down in the kitchen, covering the door so as not to wake the child. Christina began to tell the story. "It's okay, Mommy, it's okay. It's just that we're divorcing David, that's all. It's just business as usual. Are you crazy?" "But why? What's the reason?" "Everything was fine just now. I couldn't come to my senses, Margaret. I thought the same thing. I was preparing for the celebration of the anniversary. I thought, how well we will celebrate and imagine. That dress, in which I was on your 55, was not enough for me." Through tears, smiled Christina. "Don't lie. What does the dress have to do with it?" Mother waved away. "Everything has to do with it, but in general it turned out so. No sooner was I upset about the dress, but suddenly the bell rang. I opened the door, and there's a woman with a boy a little younger than our Lisa. David asks, he's the only one who can save my son. It's his child, too. Here's what she said. Oh my God, so could this be some kind of con artist? Was she asking for money or something? What does David say? That's the thing, he didn't say no. He came in just at that moment, with roses, like he was supposed to, a nice bouquet. And when he saw this madam, he turned pale, he recognized her. Christina covered her face with her hands and cried quietly. You poor girl. Margaret hugged her. Have you had to face such a despicable betrayal? That's not even the point, Mother. Christina exclaimed in a whisper. I might have swallowed that. Margaret, with an implacable look, shook her head. No, Mom, that's not what I mean. You see, this is a physical affair from years ago. Let's say I believe it was one time and accidental. The worst part isn't what he did, it's what he said. I can't forgive that under any circumstances. But cheating, then, you're ready to forgive. She pressed her lips together, Mother. That he lived with another woman and had a child with her. Do you still believe that children just appear after one meeting? He was living with two families, and you're telling me that's not the worst part. So you listen to me, Mommy. Christina moaned. I'm not talking about forgiving everything. I'm talking about what happened today. After that woman showed up and then left, the fun part started. I, of course, asked him what it was all about, and then he said that yes, he had a brief affair. But why? Because this woman, you see, reminded him of me. That is, the me I was before Lisa was born. That is, slim, young, and so on. And now I'm a fat, sluggish thing. I stink of sweat and kitchen stink. And nobody's going to want me like this for 100 years. Oh, God, Margaret whispered. Is history repeating itself? And is it so terrible? You have to believe in mysticism, jinxes, spoils, and so on. What are you talking about, Mom? What evil eye? What history? I don't know what you're talking about, but you know that woman really looks like me, like a sister. But I don't have a sister, do I? Of course you don't. I had a sister, and we're twins. Well, you remember, a baby picture, you saw it once? Christina remembered, yes. One day she found an old picture of her mother, a 5-year-old girl sitting on a couch next to the exact same girl. In response to Christina's question, the mother replied that yes, she had a twin sister. So where is she now? Asked Christina, then also a child. She's gone now. Margaret replied in a low voice, and from her darkened face, her daughter realized that further questioning was useless. She went on to make up her own story about this sister, who had died in early childhood of a serious illness. On the back of the photograph, Christina then saw the signature, Margaret and Doris, and the date. Thus, she recognized the name of her estranged aunt, Doris, "And what about that sister, Mom?" she asked, hoping that some mystery of the past and present was being revealed. And Margaret, embracing her daughter, began her sad tale. Yes, there were two sisters, Doris and Margaret. As it often happens with twins, they were almost indistinguishable in appearance, but very different in character. Margaret was serious, strict, neat, and excellent. Doris, active and restless, from a young age became a headache for parents and teachers at school. In childhood, the sisters were very friendly, but in adolescence somewhat distanced from each other, different interests, different campaigns. All of this prevented them from spending much time together. Besides, Doris liked to be the only one, and how can you do that when your twin is around? So we scattered to different companies. That is, I was not very companionable. I was more busy with my studies, not partying. And our Doris, by the time she was 20 years old, she had worn out all her parents' nerves, going out with one or the other. Everyone laughed at me, saying I was preparing to go to a nunnery. Then I met Ethan, the father of your future. David's son, also named Ethan. Christina put it in. And what did the father do with your sister? But not at once. Let me give birth to you, to live 5 years in the illusion of happiness. Margaret turned away, remembering those long-ago days, which had been so hard for her. She knew that her sister was jealous of her, that she thought everything was easy for Margaret, including the love of her parents, and not only her parents. Teachers praised Margaret. Peers could not start any games without Doris' cheerful, inventive, and fair sister. Doris herself, if she was accepted into the game, it was only because Margaret refused to start without her. After all, where Doris was, scandals and even fights often broke out. And when they grew up, there was a much more serious reason for envy. Doris, having become a bride, no longer tried to become a favorite of society with the help of her sister. She tried to win her own popularity, first of all with young people, and indeed often went out somewhere until late in the evening, and then spend the night out of the house, stopped shy. And how she liked to brag about which gentlemen were seeking her attention. To listen to Doris, so among her fans, almost cosmonauts, and the most famous artists were ready for the sake of her, Doris beautiful, and kill each other, and kill themselves, and wives with children to leave. True, no one saw these cavaliers, but there's no telling. And no one called Doris to marry, that is, according to her. They called her, begged her, and lay at her feet. But the bride herself was in no hurry to get married. And the fact that her sister had already been proposed to became for Doris a serious blow to the ego. Ha! What do you think? A simple factory worker, I would never marry such a man. She said scornfully when she learned that Ethan had proposed to Margaret. By this time, Margaret herself had had enough of her sister's jokes about her being a nun, a homebody, an academic, and about not being able to look after herself. It's embarrassing, even if someone sees you coming out of the library with a bag of books and no makeup and thinks it's me. Then you can't justify yourself to decent people. Our resemblance is a curse. So when her sister began to tease Margaret about her fiancé, Margaret replied sharply, "You might go, but no one calls you. Not simple, not complicated." Doris, from such an angry rant, turned blotchy. "Yeah, I bet your Ethan will dump you at the drop of a hat. I wouldn't dream of arguing about such things. Let your famous artists and soccer players chase you, but for my fiancé, you're probably too classy." Yes, Margaret was sure of her Ethan. Soon they were married, moved into his apartment. The need to constantly see his sister, emanating bile, was no longer necessary. Of course they had to meet, and Margaret and her husband came to visit her parents, and they visited the young people, and Doris, who remained unmarried, was often in touch with them. They now lived in different parts of the city, far away from each other, but strangely enough, Margaret would often come across her sister when she left the house. "Are you coming to see us?" she asked Doris. "I need to. I have a lot of things to do." They waved her away. Margaret did not reproach herself for her self-confidence, for the confidence in her husband, but how would they live without mutual trust? Even assuming Doris had not forgotten that long-ago argument or had a real crush on her husband's sisters, what could Doris do? She would never demean herself to fight for the one she loved. What kind of love is it if she has to somehow wrestle her own husband away from his sister? What kind of family is it if you suspect your husband of having affairs with your sister? Especially since they soon had Christina, their beloved daughter, and how happy Ethan was, how he couldn't breathe on his princess. How could such a loving husband and father be suspected of infidelity? And how painful it was when it turned out that everything was a lie and betrayal. Even to her grown-up daughter, Margaret could not tell about what her father had once done. And now, apparently, the time has come, and in connection with this, already daughter tragedy. I don't know when or what exactly started between them. I was so busy with you, my family, which seemed happy, and then it turned out that your father not just cheated, but cheated regularly, that is, lived on 2 houses. That's what Doris told me, and then Ethan confirmed it. Christina suddenly remembered how she had stood at the door of her parents' room as a little girl and heard her mother crying and saying something angry to her father, and he mumbling guiltily in response. She didn't remember the words, and she probably couldn't understand them at the time. It was probably the very scene after which her father was gone. Margaret herself remembered the conversation, and it was clear from the way her still beautiful face was contorted by a twitch. "You lived with my sister, and now you're saying you're not so much to blame for what happened? I can imagine how you used to laugh when you met at me." "No, Doris, we didn't think we were laughing, and I didn't live with her. We just met, without much feeling on my part, anyway." "Why then?" "Why then? Was it a sport to deceive us both? You lived with me in secret, took advantage of my sister, and thought everything was fine. You're good, aren't you?" "Well, Doris, don't you realize I'm not the only one in your life anymore? You're so busy, Christina. You're so tired. No, do you hear what you're saying? You've been running to my sister for certain favors to keep me busy. And you think that's an acceptable explanation. That it's forgivable. That I'm going to throw myself on your neck with tears of gratitude and adoration. No, but I think I can still be understood." Confused, guiltily, Ethan said, I understand that you are a mean and unscrupulous man, and I'm not going to live with that. But Doris, as I understand it, doesn't mind at all, and I yield you to her. Don't say that, my dear. I never thought such a trifle could keep us apart. My sister is a trifle. My feelings are nothing. All right, Ethan, I can't have this conversation anymore. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. Will you at least think of your daughter? Christina is exactly what I'm thinking about. I don't want her living in an atmosphere of lies and betrayal. I won't let her learn to put up with that kind of attitude from an early age. You didn't just betray me, Ethan. You can't be a bit of a traitor. You betrayed our daughter by dating her aunt. There will be no more of you or Doris in our lives. And Margaret kept her word, filed for divorce, and no longer wanted, not only to meet with her ex-husband and sister, but did not even know anything about how they lived, whether they stayed together or separated. That's how it is, my daughter, and yet I didn't save you from the same fate. Wait, Mom, if this Doris, if she's your twin sister, then maybe David, Nancy is their daughter? Otherwise, how can you explain the resemblance? It makes sense. Twin mothers, same father. It's very possible. I have no idea how they lived after it happened, but does that change anything? Explains anything. How does that affect your decision? Have you decided what you're going to do next, by the way? I probably have. I don't want to live with a traitor either. And I don't want to see his mistress. Even if she's my sister by blood, it doesn't change anything. It's the first and hopefully the last time I've seen her. But Lisa, she's so attached to her father. How am I going to tell her that? Well, it's no problem at all. She's 9 years old. She should understand a lot of things. Yeah, you can tell her the whole truth. You're the one who was 5 years old after the divorce and missed your daddy too. How do you explain it to the little girl? Maybe it was my fault. You could have told her the whole story instead of just dismissing your constant, "Where's Daddy? When is he coming?" That was hard for me to hear. But then you told me everything, I remember. Yeah, I was about 10 years old, and then 2 years later, I heard he was killed by a car. You didn't even go to the funeral. I didn't even know about it. I mean, I heard about his death about a year later, I guess. And I didn't feel much, really. It was sad, maybe, but that's about it. It's weird because I loved him so much until I found out about the affair. And then it was hard. At first he came to you, not me, but I saw him, the traitor. It's so hard, Mommy. I love David too. I didn't know until this morning. Why did she come, that Nancy? Maybe it's a good thing she came to save you from having to go on with the traitor. After all, he betrayed you and your daughter. And the fact that it was years ago only complicates matters. It'd be okay if you'd been married for 20 years, tired of each other and all that. But then you're young, you're beautiful even now. But then, 5 or 7 years ago, he said I was fat, and that's why. Even if it wasn't cheating, just saying that, it was worth leaving him. You're fat and he's what? Apollo? Stop it, daughter. It's up to you, of course, but I don't even understand your doubts about it. Your husband cheated on you, insulted you, and you're wondering if you should stay with him. Margaret raised an eyebrow. No, of course not. I'm thinking about how I'm going to get over it. It's very hard for me, I'm sitting here now and thinking, how am I going to live without him? How did I live and live? What about the others? You don't think about that, but about how you would live, seeing every day a man who treated you so cruelly. Imagine, tomorrow either he will come here, or you will go there for things, documents, and he will chat you up, talk to you, kiss you in the end. And you will start to live on, a year, 2, 10 years, and you will know about what he thinks about you, how he justifies his cheating, and there will be many more. You can't be a bit of a traitor, remember that. Christina shook her head. You're right, Mom. I shouldn't give in to persuasion. And how do you know if there'll be persuasions? After all, he still has to meet with this Nancy, at least about the boy's treatment. And we don't know if the boy's sick. Maybe it was Nancy who jumped through unsuccessful marriages, did not succeed, and came back to David, hoping to get him in her net. And to do that, she thought it was a good idea to declare the child sick. But that's quite ungodly. Isn't it ungodly to sleep with a married man? Isn't it ungodly to go to his house for any purpose? To tell his wife from the doorstep that she was her husband's mistress, is that good? You can expect anything from such people. Did she discuss the illness and treatment of that poor baby in front of him? Yes, I thought it was strange too. The kid's not a little kid anymore. Well, you see, this poor boy, I'm sure and more in his life, and seen and heard, but it's okay. You should not think about him and about yourself and your daughter. In the meantime, Christina, go to bed. Imagine how happy Lisa will be to see her mom tomorrow. Christina went to bed, but she cried again. Again she lay in her former nursery. She was back, but now her daughter was sleeping next to her, and there was no hope for changes in her personal life. Mom is alone and not lost, and she, Christina, will not be lost. But I don't want Lisa to repeat their fate. Approximately the same thing said to her and her husband when the next day she resolutely told him of her desire to divorce and have no more dealings with him. Well, I see. Margaret had done her job. You're the only one who's ever cuckoo, so your daughter shouldn't be married. You'd think your daughter would grow up lonely in this environment. Think about what your son will grow up to be, and Lisa has someone to take care of her. Oh, for God's sake, if you think I'm going to be on my feet, don't worry. David, after a night of worrying, decided he wasn't going to beg his wife's forgiveness. There's nothing to apologize for, strictly speaking. Yeah, something happened 7 years ago, so what? Oh yes, he also did not hold back, said too much. Well, that happens. If Christina herself makes it clear that she is not ready for a constructive dialogue, then it can be discussed. Apologize and apologize. And if she sits with such a judicial face, then fine, she has already decided everything, not without the help of her mom. Let her live as a mom's daughter, she'll get bored, and then we can discuss the matter. That's what he told his wife. I do not intend to beg and apologize now, but if you do decide to return, I will always be waiting for you. I love you, Christina, and I always will. The wife, now almost ex-wife, could take it. And David really had a lot of troubles now. It was necessary to discuss with Ethan's doctor his condition to make a treatment plan. Then David himself had to undergo the necessary examinations. Bone marrow transplantation is not a quick and easy procedure, and then we can only pray that the boy will recover. And to establish paternity, he'll have 2 children. I mean, there's already 2, but they don't know it yet. He will introduce the brother and sister, and in any case they will have to meet. After seeing his wife off, who had packed her things and her papers, he called Nancy. It was time to start Ethan's treatment. They met at the hospital, where the boy was going to be admitted to prepare for surgery. David took the necessary tests there, and he and Nancy sat in the hallway, waiting for the doctor to tell them the results. I'm sorry, David. I must have gotten you in trouble. I hope you've made up with your wife. Nancy said timidly, We haven't quarreled. The man replied grimly. He wasn't going to tell his former mistress about the details of his private life. I'm very glad, but you understand, I had no other choice. I didn't know if you would agree. And without this transplant, Ethan had no chance. You have no idea how grateful I am. Why didn't you tell me about him before? I would never abandon my child. But I didn't know that. I thought you'd just apologize, send me away, that's all. I thought you said you loved your wife, and you weren't going to leave her. I'm not, but what's the baby got to do with it? 7 years later, you show up with this news. I'm telling you, I would never have shown up if it wasn't for this situation. I'm doing fine on my own. I don't need anyone. You didn't get married? David wasn't interested in that. He just asked so he wouldn't have to sit in silence. No, I tried, but it didn't work out again. I loved you, you know, and maybe I still do. Don't talk about it. I loved you too, but that's in the past. Well, you showing up and spilling everything to my Christina was a bad memory. He was really angry with Nancy, and he wasn't going to hide it. She apparently decided to be frank, too, and I deliberately decided to let her know. Why should I be the one to suffer? Why should she get everything and I get nothing? Let her know that her happiness is not so cloudless. Resolutely, even angrily, said the woman. Well done. What can I say? That we also have a daughter, you did not think, of course. And your revelations could, and on her, reflected in a bad way. But she wasn't home, was she, I take it? Well, let's not talk about that. We have a baby to think about. Tell me about him, how he was born, how he grew up. Did he know he had a father? Or did you tell him I was an astronaut? No, he didn't ask me much. Though, you know, he's a clever boy, with an inquisitive mind, understanding a lot. Nancy became animated, starting to tell about her son, and David, under the murmur of her voice, thought about how he would have to build a relationship with his child now. You know then, when we left your apartment, he did ask, was that my dad? Are we going to live with him? What could I say? I said that yes, Dad, but that we'll live the same way for now, and then we'll see what happens. I couldn't promise anything on your behalf. That's right. I can't make any promises myself. I'll pay alimony, of course, and I'll try to pay for the previous years. What about socializing? We'll wait a little longer. He needs to get back to normal. Even after a successful transplant, we can't say that he'll be healthy right away. A doctor came out to see them. He said reassuringly that David was a perfect match for Ethan, so they should get ready to collect the material. What about Ethan? Would he be healthy after the operation? Nancy was worried. I think so, but how fast will the recovery process go? The operation went well for both David and Ethan. The boy recovered quickly. The young body wanted to live, so it fought the disease with renewed vigor. And although fully cured boy can be considered only after 5 safely lived years, the prognosis of doctors were the most favorable. At the same time, David was busy with another process, divorce proceedings. He often visited his son in the hospital. During this time, he got used to the boy, but still missed his daughter very much. Christina did not flatly forbid them to meet, but it was necessary to come to the house to the mother-in-law, and it was not so pleasant. Yes, and the girl, who apparently said too much, looked at her father judgmentally. Staying alone with her didn't work, and neither did Christina. Margaret apparently feared that he would pass out a goodbye and the daughter would not resist. Only after leaving the courtroom, after the divorce was finalized, did he manage to talk to his now ex-wife. Well, Christina, now your soul is satisfied, that is, your mother? Asked David. What does Mom have to do with it? With an uncomprehending look, asked Christina. You didn't betray her. You betrayed Lisa and me. You know very well that it's not true. I have never betrayed you, and I will always love you and my daughter. If your opinion changes, you only have to take a hint. Don't be ridiculous, David. That's never going to happen. You know, I think if you confessed back then, it would have been different, but it was too mean. But what's there to talk about now? It's just the way it is. And I confess I'm glad I didn't go along with you and multiply your lies. How's Ethan? He's recovering. Thank you. Good for you. I know you'll want him to meet his sister, but I don't think it's necessary right now. Maybe when they're older. Right now I mean Margaret, and I don't let her anywhere near me. She's running away, afraid I'll say something. He pointed at his ex-mother-in-law, walking quickly towards them from the bus stop. Well, have a good day. Don't forget that I'll always be glad to hear from you. He nodded to Margaret and hurried away. They couldn't talk any further. Christina did not want to, and her mother was always wary. You're a very cooperative woman, Christina. I don't want you to forgive him and suffer further. And Christina agreed with her mother, finding more and more advantages in this life without a man in the house. The daughter, seeing that her mother and grandmother were uncomfortable with reminders of David, also spoke of him less and less often, and even when they met, she became more and more withdrawn. David did not give up hope that he would ever be able to reunite with his loved ones, but at the same time he realized that the likelihood of that was fading with each passing day. He had a conversation with Nancy that he could not call pleasant. He saw Ethan quite often, went for walks with him, and sometimes Nancy joined them. David did not tell her that he had separated from his wife. He answered her questions by saying that they were fine, but he had brought his son to his house a few times, and he had probably told his mom about his dad living alone. Neither his aunt nor his sister was there, and at another meeting Nancy bluntly asked, "So you separated from your wife after all?" Ethan says, "I don't think that's any of your business." The man interrupted her. "Yes, of course it is. It's just that Ethan would like to see his little sister, to get to know her, because it's a child's natural desire. He shouldn't have talked about sisters and aunts and things like that. They can't meet now. Lisa's mother doesn't think it's necessary. She never forgave you. Look, Nancy, I don't want to discuss this with you, now or ever. My relationship with Christina is none of your business, I'm sorry." "No, it's you I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interfere." But this conversation must have given Nancy some hope. Did she have such strong feelings for her ex-lover, or was she just tired of being alone? After all, she'd never really been able to get on with anyone. David, he loved her, and they had a child together, and now he was free. Just like she was, why couldn't they get together and become husband and wife? But David was cold and aloof when they met. He met his son with pleasure, but Nancy's presence clearly weighed him down. Realizing that he could not wait for decisive actions, the woman decided to take everything into her own hands. He is probably very much distressed about the separation from his wife and daughter, and probably feels guilty before me. After all, he left me so cold-bloodedly. I've been raising my son alone for so many years. I need to help him. Maybe he is happy to propose to me, but he does not dare, afraid of rejection, she thought, and during the next meeting she made up her mind. While Ethan was swinging on a swing on the playground, Nancy sat down beside him and put her hand on his shoulder. "Tell me, David, do you remember our past?" "Why?" "I mean, no, not really. But you loved me, didn't you?" Ethan was born of love, wasn't he? Her tone was almost belittling. "Well, of course it was love. Why would I be with you if I didn't love you?" David answered grudgingly. He did not like to say that he loved his Christina in her, in Nancy too. "Do you think we could get together again? I have loved you all these years and I still do. I'll never have anyone else. Don't, Nancy." David's gone. "I won't have anyone else either, except Christina. Whether we split up or not doesn't matter. I love her, and you must understand that if you love her, we'll never be together." "Well, no, then no." Tears of resentment, of insulted dignity glistened in the woman's eyes. "So your wife left you. She won't let you see your daughter, so you cling to your son. So our son has to live like this." "Yes, I hope so. But it doesn't matter. I just don't like the sight of you flickering in front of my eyes like that. So Ethan and I will soon move to my hometown. There's nothing to keep me here, and I have parents there. Believe me, I'm not doing this out of spite. I just can't live alone anymore. Ethan, stop swinging. Let's go home." And so David lost his son. Soon he was seeing Nancy and Ethan off, consoling himself that they weren't going that far away. 3 hours by car, they could get there. He even thought that maybe he should have gotten back together with this woman, who no longer seemed so similar to his beloved, but there was still hope for reconciliation with Christina, and a few days later he bought a large bouquet of flowers and went to his ex-wife's apartment. In the apartment he was let in and desperate penitential speech listened to. But, "No, David, I have already gotten used to living without you and realized that I cannot forget neither what you did nor what you said. I'm not angry, I'm not resentful, but I remember everything. And you're unpleasant after all this time. Thanks for the flowers, but you can take them and give them to someone else. No, Will, let them stay. They're beautiful. Go away, David. Think about your future without me." David came home with nothing. The only woman he wanted to live with. He doesn't need him, and he doesn't need the others. Yes, he has a job. A lot of people need him, but it turns out that's not enough. Here came the weekend. He sits in an empty apartment and realizes that he made a mistake, which cannot be corrected, but he tried. He explained to Christina that he cannot live without her, repented, humiliated. And what? She can't forget some stupid affair of 7 years ago, some rude words that came out accidentally. He opened a bottle of vodka he'd bought on the way home. What could he do but drink alone? I'll get drunk, and I'll lose my job too, and to hell with it, because I don't want anything else, neither to work nor to beg for forgiveness. What a situation! I cannot meet with my daughter because I love her mother too much, with my son, on the contrary, because I do not love. How can you get so confused? He thought, drinking alcohol shot after shot. David regretted those mistakes that led to such a result and realized that he could not fix anything.